Yeah, and there's a lot of passing zones where there's an intersecting road. We got them to change airport road. And
We're unmuted and
I pulled out.
yeah, whenever you
pulling
wanna.
up, turn right,
Okay.
I looked left, but I didn't look right when somebody passed it. It was in my lane.
Why don't we get started? I want to take everybody off mute. We are recording. We off mute?
We're off mute, ready to go.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the May 23rd meeting of the Ulster County Transportation Council's Technical Committee. We'll have a welcome and introductions. Why don't we go around the table here, and then I'll ask Dave to read off the names of people that are on remotely. My name's Dennis Doyle. I'm the planning director, also director of the Transportation Council.
Mike Baden, excuse me, Mike Baden, Town of Rochester Supervisor.
Kevin Smith, Chair of the Ulster County Trails Advisory Committee, Board Chair of Woodstock Land Conservancy, where we help coordinate the Ashokan Rail Trail Stewards Program.
Laura Petit, I'm the proxy here for Sopus, County Legislator and Chair of Public Works.
Fine, Ulster County DPW.
Brian Slack, Principal Transportation Planner, Ulster County Transportation Council.
David Stoss, UCTC.
Barbara Buda, resident on Kings Highway and Thirdly. Here to keep you guys, you know, to the grindstone, and tell you that that little pinch between Kings Highway and the railroad is getting more dangerous. I was rear-ended going into my driveway. There are no speed signs, no speed limit signs. So that's why I'm here.
Okay,
And have a good day. Brenda Royce, Kings Highway resident, George, as well.
thank you. And Dave, if you could read off who's on the line.
Yeah, online we have Leanne Thornton, Chris Hannett, Dan Coots, and Shelley Johnston.
Anybody we missed? Hearing none. Call for citizens' comments. Now would be a good time.
Now, hold that, one repeat. I'd like to know, where we stand with the traffic count on Kings Highway. We have another business coming out, storage units just before Solite. That's right across from a quarry situation. And I think it really needs attention.
We'll get to that and when we get through the agenda, we'll answer that question for you,
Okay,
Barb.
great, thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay, anything else?
Anything else, Barb?
No,
No? Anyone here?
If I may, as a citizen, just to follow up on Barbara Budick with the Kings Highway, feasibility study, someone had called up, they used the UCAT bus, and there's a drop off at the Walgreens at that Sims Plaza. And she says, I take my life in my hands every time I try to run across, what is it, 4, 5, 6 lanes of traffic. Many of our stops do not have crosswalks. There's no bus shelters. There's like nothing to, you know, when you pull into Rosendale here where the trail is, there's like, you can't miss it. I mean, once you're really not paying attention, all the stop signs and the lights and, you know, rail trail ahead stop sign. And the other concern is, Amtrak announced that they were going to be possibly eliminating their Amtrak stop in Rhinebeck, Rhinecliff, because of parking, which is a little silly unless it's just alarming. You know,
I believe that was an
yeah.
announcement from the supervisor, not from
That was the
Amtrak.
supervisor,
Yeah.
okay. But we were looking at perhaps of expanding our public transportation across the bridge to the park and ride, and then encouraging the Duchess Loop to come up further to take them. I mean, if they're running out of parking, that's a great thing. That means more people are using their public transportation system.
We can address that in,
I think it's the construction project.
Yeah.
Is part of that,
Okay.
so the renovation of the
Yeah.
station.
What I read was that it was a temporary during the construction
Yeah.
and that it would be reopened after
Yeah.
the improvements.
We-
Okay, all right, very good.
I know that NISDOT is looking at this, so. Issue. Any other citizens' comments from anyone online?
I think we have one from online. Let me just swap over. See here, Leanne, I think.
Yes, just wondering on a county level, is there any proposed legislation with regard to the e-bikes that are becoming more and more common? I understand, I think New Paltz has a local ordinance, but just wondering if county transportation is going to weigh in on this or if the county legislator legislation is planning on drafting some kind of resolution, so there's some consistency on what the expectations are if you're driving an e-bike, like in the Village of Saugerties or on a town road or anywhere, like in the city of Kingston.
So we're not aware of anything that's being considered at a county level, and there is New York state legislation that controls where e-bikes are
Mhm.
permitted on various roads, and it's a restriction based on speed limits.
Okay.
Are you aware of that, Leanne?
Yes, we discussed it at our stack meeting a
Yeah.
couple of weeks ago, and that was just a concern of some of the members that, we are aware of the state regs, but whether or not there was going to be any, any other local actions taken, by other communities. The chief of police has drafted a resolution that he is going to present, I think, to the village board and the town board. So I was just curious as to whether or not there were any other local legislation out there that might be in addition to what the state guidelines are.
Yeah, we'll reach out to Chief Sinagra with respect to that legislation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Dennis, if I might.
Sure.
Leanne, this is Kevin Smith. Legislator Kathy Nolan has been starting work on a draft resolution governing e-bike use. I don't want to speak to more specifics of it because I think it's early days.
And
Okay.
Continuing to, kind of go back to the drawing board.
that's mostly with respect to trails, as I recall.
I believe it's mostly in respect to trails. In my opinion, the state policy is incoherent. So it's creating tremendous challenges, both for local municipalities as well as for the county.
Mhm.
And the city of Kingston is wrestling with this right now. They have a draft resolution that has been going through committee. And speaking personally, based on what I've read about the latest revisions to that, it's problematic in many ways, in my view.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Depends on when I'd look to make a comment. I don't know if this is the
Sure.
appropriate time or if it should be later.
Any other comments online?
I see none currently.
Kevin?
Hi, again, Kevin Smith, Chair of the Trails Advisory Committee to the legislature, and involved with trails and complete streets. I'm a liaison to the Town of Woodstock's Complete Streets Committee. I'm here to ask you all for help. I believe we have a situation in the county with regards to traffic safety that is calling for real leadership and sustained commitment to address an issue that is in many ways analogous to what's happening with e-bikes. There are many issues regarding transportation and traffic that are outside of the control of local municipalities or of the county or this body. However, the situation nationally is at an epidemic proportion. The United States tracked very closely to the rest of the world from the late 70s when traffic safety and vehicular safety policies began to get passed, and we made remarkable improvements in tandem with much of the developed world up until around 2010. And since that time, the United States has diverged from the rest of those countries, and many of them have made remarkable strides in reducing and in some cases almost virtually eliminating traffic fatalities, especially as they pertain to pedestrian fatalities, bicycle fatalities, and people with disabilities using mobility assist devices. There are a number of different issues. There's not time for me to go into them here. We have a safe systems approach. I apologize for not knowing if this body has formally adopted the safe systems approach, and if there is a action plan that is developing metrics for the service area of the Transportation Council as the metropolitan planning organization for our area and for Ulster County itself. Speaking as the chair of the Trails Advisory Committee, we've done yeoman's work in this county on the partnership between the county government, city of Kingston, the local municipalities, nonprofits, at creating at this point a large portion of the spine of a non-motorized transportation network using rail trails, other corridors where available to connect between our communities, including parallel to our many of our most heavily trafficked transportation corridors. The challenge is within our communities, within the hamlet centers, the business districts, the points of interest, our amazing cultural and recreational natural resource areas, and getting people safely to be able to move within their communities and to be able to go where they need to go safely. In our 2020 State of the Trails report to the legislature and the county executive, the Trails Advisory Committee had next steps recommendations. One of them was to complete that network and close the gaps. I'm disheartened to say that I believe that we may be losing access for the next 5 years to one of those sections. The Ulster Delaware corridor, the section currently specified to go out for RFP for tourist rail operations. We expect that to go out fairly shortly. That's implementation of policy as decided by the legislature in December of 2015. This is the most heavily trafficked highway into the Catskill Park. It is a death zone for pedestrians and people on bicycles. It is also one of our major tourism areas. The Ashokan Rail Trail alone is now clocking some 180 to 200,000 visits a year. And that's both residents and visitors to our area. The state has invested untold millions of dollars in the Catskill Park. It's one of the premier recreational areas in the state, if not regionally. People on bicycles and walking should be able to access it safely. And people that need to travel along the Route 28 corridor, including people who can't afford or for whatever reason don't drive cars, should have the same rights to access the Catskill Park and to be able to move through that corridor safely without fearing for their lives. We've lost lives in that section of the corridor. They tend to be people with limited means. You don't read about them except for very brief articles in the newspaper. We don't have one signalized crosswalk between the traffic circle and the county line at High Mount. Not one. Not even in Boyceville. Not in Shokan. Not in Xena, where the town of Woodstock boundary is literally 100 feet from the end of the Ashokan Rail Trail. These are next steps. We call them community connections in our State of the Trails report. This is the meaningful stuff. This is where the rubber meets the road in terms of increasing the mode share of people on bicycles and on foot. we need to do this for climate change. We could achieve 100% conversion to electric vehicles in the commercial and private vehicle fleet. And we are not going to meet the benchmarks we need to meet according to federal and state policy and probably county policy. I don't know what metrics we have. We need to leverage the assets that are our beautiful small town, and the fact that we still have intact hamlet centers in many locations with some density of population. We need to make it safe for people to move about. The two major reasons people don't ride bicycles: they don't feel safe and they don't have places to ride them. E-bikes are part of the solution. They absolutely are game changers in terms of flattening our hilly terrain and making it possible for people who are not high-level recreational athletes to ride in our hills and valleys. They absolutely need to be part of the solution. And instead, what I'm starting to see, because we have incoherent policy on the state level, is excuse me for saying so, but absurd and dangerous policies that are trying to regulate the behavior of people on bicycles, when the real risk is that our vehicles are getting dramatically heavier because of transition because of the popularity of SUVs to start with, the conversion to electric vehicles, which are much heavier. They are much faster. They are capable of radical acceleration of the kind that combustion vehicles don't have. We have a number of things on our roads, and we have speed limits that we can't change locally without approval from the state. We have roadways in Woodstock, in my community, that absolutely should not be 30 miles an hour, and the municipality does not have the authority to change those without petitioning the state DOT, traffic study, et cetera, and then maybe it's granted on one roadway. This has to change. We need leadership and commitment from you folks, whose work I admire tremendously. We need it from the county exec, and we need it from the legislature, honestly. It's the only way that we are going to change some of these things, and we need counties and MPOs to be banding together and raising their voices along with other ones so that we actually can get the kinds of changes that we need at the state and federal level. I ride bike all the time. I ride on our trails. I ride to connect. Use the trails to connect to other roads. Every time I swing a leg over a saddle, I know that it is a political act on my part. I know I am assuming a certain amount of risk. If something happens to me because I have a crash with a vehicle, I want you all to know that I was aware of this risk, but that I was doing so, exercising my right to utilize public space as allowed under New York state law. I should be able to do that safely. We should be thinking about the most vulnerable road users. Other countries have done this. They're doing it now. It's not one size fits all. Denmark, Amsterdam have done it one way with protected cycleways. Helsinki and Finland are doing it a different way by dramatically lowering speed limits and enforcing those speed laws. And I recognize we also have restrictions there in terms of traffic cameras and enforcement. But again, this is where we need concerted action, and we need leadership from our county leaders and from our elected officials at the state level and our representatives at the federal level. So I thank you. This should not be, as Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg says, accepted as the quote unquote price of doing business. To have a 40,000 fatalities a year? Are you kidding me? What are we doing here? pedestrian fatalities, bicycle fatalities, they're going up by double digits, 35% last year. Okay, I'm sorry, I am off my soapbox. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. Again, I appreciate all of the work that people from the different departments, the legislature, the Transportation Council, and the Planning Department. We need your help.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other citizens' comments? Anybody online?
See none from online.
Thank you. Approval of the March 28th, 2023 Technical Committee Meeting Summary. Do I have a motion for discussion purposes?
So move, Mike Beatty.
Do I have a second? Mr. Pine seconded. I have a motion and a second. Do I have any additional discussion? Hearing none. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
None from online.
So carried. Thank you. Communications and announcements, Brian?
The one that comes to mind is the Federal Protect grant opportunity was announced last month. I apologize, I do not know what that acronym stands for, but these are resiliency funds through the bipartisan infrastructure law to provide funding to improve the resiliency of our transportation infrastructure. They include both planning and capital grant opportunities. The Transportation Council will very likely apply for a phase 2 planning grant. A minimum request amount is $100,000. There is no local match required for planning projects. So we anticipate proposing doing a phase 2 study of our initial vulnerability assessment. So the deadline for those grant applications, I believe, is mid-August. I think it's August 16th. I also intend to forward the opportunity notice to at least Ulster County. I think there may be some opportunities for potential bridge awards in Ulster County. And I've also sent them to City of Kingston, that I know has been working on some waterfront resiliency issues of its own. So there may be other opportunities for municipalities. And I just want to remind all of our members that all of the NOFOs, notices of funding opportunities, as they are published, are available through the USDOT, and the links are also available through the UCTC funding opportunities site page on our website. So please, if you're interested in possible transportation funding opportunities, that's the best place to go to find what the latest news is for funding opportunities at the federal level.
Anything else, Brian? Any communications announcements from the council members?
See none from online.
Okay, thank you.
May I follow up with a question on that? Does the funding, in order to get that, you have to adhere to county policies? I mean, we do have a bike and pedestrian policy, which I understand the Trails Committee has asked to be updated. And we were at a bridge site yesterday in Phoenicia, and I think they were kind of taken aback when we asked if there could be bike lanes put on each side. I don't know what the size is. They said they could do up to 4 feet.
Yeah,
So the
4 feet's good enough? Okay.
that's the proposal. I'm
Okay.
saying it's good enough. I'm just saying it's a High Street Bridge. It's Bridge Street Bridge going into Phoenicia.
But I mean,
Yeah.
is this something we could continue to put into all of any of the funding requests where they're given priority, or it's expected that they put in?
Well, this is a planning grant, and it has to do with essentially risk associated with climate change. But
Would you raise bridges?
not necessarily, but
Yeah, we wouldn't get into the design specifications in the
Okay.
planning study of this. So we're essentially trying to identify and prioritize existing facilities for future improvements based on the level of risk
Mhm.
that is currently posed, whether it be flooding, extreme heat, or other hazards. That's the purpose of the resiliency study work that we've been working on.
did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, what about the vulnerability?
That's what we're speaking. Yeah, we've done a vulnerability assessment and a criticality assessment. So then the next step is to go look at those areas and see if there's solutions.
But it's strictly infrastructure, it's not.
It's planning, it's not implementation. Right, and a lot of some of what we're looking at is not only county roads, but also state roads. And local streets as well. Anything else?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the right place for it, but it probably is. The O&W rail trail connection, from Accord to Cohasset that OSI is, slated to use, county ARPA funds for, is out to bid. They expect, think they're opening the bids. If it's not the end of this week, it's early next week.
And that's Rochester section, and then they have a section in
A
Ellenville.
section in Ellenville, oh, well, a section in Woolworthson.
Woolworthson,
I don't think
yeah.
it's in
Yeah,
Ellenville,
you're right, yeah,
So they're non-contiguous segments under one?
Correct.
yeah, they are,
Correct.
yeah.
There are two segments. They just completed the Walkill Valley Rail Trail section, and now they're moving to the other. Anyway, the bids are scheduled to be open either this week or early next week.
It was a 3-week turnaround.
They anticipate construction to start mid-June with completion by the end of the construction,
Okay.
by the end of October, I think they're saying.
Yeah, as long as we're doing announcements, I can, you done, Mike?
Yeah.
All right, as long as we're,
Along those lines,
Thank
if
you.
I may,
yes,
we should ask the town of Warsing to report on their tip project for a short segment of the O&W as well, that has been on the tip for over a decade at this point. We had significant funds for that segment. And I have not heard any updates on the progress of
Okay.
that project. So
we'll
along
follow.
those lines, I would like to follow up as well and try to get a report from the town.
Okay.
Sorry, Dennis.
That's good, no. So just along those lines on, while we're talking trails, the county did start construction on the O&W section between Kingston and Route 209. And the section that is closest to Route 209 has seen its first level of pavement down on that. We've had excellent cooperation with Central Hudson in terms of moving the poles and letting them move and let us move through. And so that we're on target now to meet our deadline, which is the end of September, early fall, for completion of that project. And the legislature did pass the contract for beginning the design effort on the work to be done from High Mount in the Shandaken, from High Mount down to the Bel Air Day Use area. So that contract is moving through, it moves the legislative process. Now it's moving through the final contract management process. So that work is ongoing right now while we're going through that contract management process. We have had some initial walkthroughs on that quarter. Okay, anything else? Moving on. New business, draft resolution item A, draft resolution 2023-04, allocation of previously unallocated Federal Transit Administration FTA Section 5307 formula funds for regional transit systems. Brian? Oh, no, excuse me. I need a motion for discussion purposes.
I'll make that.
Thank you, Mr. Reed and Mr. Pine. I have a motion and a second. Brian?
Sure, this is a request submitted by Ulster County for additional funding from the Mid-Hudson Valley Transportation Management Area to our unallocated balance. We currently have an unallocated balance of $8.7 million in 5307 funds. Those are FTA 5307 funds that can be used for capital. The request is for bus stops without shelters. It's for bus shelters, excuse me. At locations throughout Ulster County, I believe $500,000 plus a required 20% match should be enough funding for roughly 15 bus shelters, hopefully more. Some will be repaired, others will be replaced. This request is also pending approval by the Dutchess County and Orange County Transportation Councils. And thus far, there have been no questions or complaints regarding the use, and those councils have been in support as well. If and when the award is granted, it will reduce the Mid-Hudson Valley TMA funds for future programming from 8.7 million to 8.2 million. And again, a 20% local match from the county would be required.
We have other applications going through as well. I mean, don't think this is the only application. This is an addition to the request that we made, which is almost 4 million, as I recall.
That's right. During the previous meeting cycle, we had a resolution very similar to this one that included funding for bus purchases, as well as facility upgrades at Ulster County facilities, transit facilities, as well as Dutchess County facilities. The request for the bus shelters had been omitted due to clerical error, let's call it, from that resolution. So we are now processing it through separate resolutions to get everything back on track.
Any questions for those in the room? Any questions or comments from those online?
I see none from online.
Hearing none. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So carried. And that was the only action item on here. So other old business.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I jumped the gun. We want to add a few, because we knew it would be a relatively brief agenda, we wanted to add a few updates regarding ongoing projects. But before I do that, I wanted to remind everyone that the UCTC 2-year voting member turnover is going to occur between this meeting and the next policy committee meeting. That is scheduled to occur on June 4th, 2023. That's a typo in the operating procedures, I actually noticed. So 2-year voting members presently are Town of Hurley, Town of Esopus, Town of Marlborough, Town of Shawangum, Village of New Paltz, Town of Warsing, Town of Kingston. This is your last meeting. And after today, those municipalities will swap with the Village of Saugerties, Town of Rosendale, Town of Lloyd, Town of Plattekill, Village of Ellenville, Town of New Paltz, Town of Woodstock. The 2-year voting membership is detailed in our UCTC operating procedures, which are available on our website, page 2 of the operating procedures.
Any questions about that?
So I will be notifying through mail and email all of our new members that their voting membership is now up, and give the municipalities, the highest elected official, the opportunity to update their voting proxies.
Brian, can you forward that to myself as well as the president of the Supervisors Association? Because I can certainly reiterate that at our next meeting, which is the 3rd
Sure, and
Tuesday of June. So
we welcome the town, of course, for our rural voting membership, we call it the 7 as 1. For our 7 most rural municipalities, designate one municipality to be the voting member among them, which of course is Town of Rochester. And the town, the Ulster County Association of Town Supervisors selects that member at will. So at any time that can change, and I will certainly appreciate using the town association to notify folks of the other 2-year voting.
thank you. Yeah, I can just reiterate that.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Any questions from anyone in the room?
I would add, if there's members that we currently have on the policy committee that would like to continue participation, it may be worthwhile reaching out to, the sister municipality to see if you could continue on as a proxy member. Helps with continuity and, quorum.
Does the proxy have to be officially designated by resolution by the municipality?
No, it's simply a letter from the
Chief
highest
elected
elected
official.
official.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Membership is by chief
Oh,
elected
I'll
official.
also let them know that
Yeah.
as well.
Thank you.
The 7 most rural municipalities are
Denning, Gardner, Hardenburg, Marbletown, Olive, Rochester, and Shandaken.
Okay, anything online? Any questions online?
I see none.
All right, Brian, next.
Briefly, the carbon reduction funds, we did issue a request for expressions of interest. We received 3 requests for use of those funds, Town of New Paltz, for to address funding shortfalls for the Henry W. Du Bois rail path project, sorry. Village of New Paltz for a sidewalk project, and City of Kingston for its Foxhall and Flatbush sidewalk project. What we have tentatively decided to do to address these requests is wait for these municipalities to receive bids, construction bids, and when we see what the specific shortfalls are, we will provide the available funding.
We have to go back to the council. Right.
We can notify the council, yeah. There's no process specifically for the distribution of these funds through any operating procedures. So
Okay, we'll
it's,
come back to the council.
we'll leave it to the chair. Of
Yeah.
course, we'll come back
Yeah.
to the council.
Yeah.
If the chair requests it.
For those. Thank you.
Yep.
Is that UNCDOT? Is it?
Yeah, so regarding carbon reduction fund, the MPOs receive a sub-allocation from the carbon reduction program, which is a federal program. These are federal funds, 80% federal, 20% local matches required. The project rules were detailed in the expression letter, but they include any project that was formerly transportation alternative eligible is automatically carbon reduction fund eligible. But carbon reduction fund also includes things like intelligent transportation system projects, signalization improvement projects, anything to reduce carbon use and reduction of carbon use that's transportation related is eligible for the use of those funds. We did not receive a huge sub-allocation. I believe it's roughly $200,000 per year over the course of a 5-year bill. So just shy of $1 million. We have released, we are allowed to use 2 years of that funding. The later 3 years, we need to wait, obviously, for them to become available because it's federal fiscal year 25, 6, and 7. But also those funds need to be spent in coordination with a statewide carbon reduction plan, which is not yet prepared. Yes, New York State DOT is preparing its carbon reduction plan. Once that plan is finished by DOT, all those funds need to be in coordination and compliance with the state carbon reduction plan.
Does that state DOT plan contain a non-motorized?
It's not yet
transportation
written.
plan or active transportation plan with?
I can, it's not written. I do not know what goes into a statewide carbon reduction plan.
Okay.
So I will say, however, that we recently learned that the New York State DOT is going to begin an update of what it's now calling its active transportation plan. That is the statewide plan, the first update of the plan since 2009. So that planning process will be underway this year. You're welcome.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions on that?
None from my mind.
Hearing none. Move on. Project updates.
Certainly, we can, maybe we can do this in coordination. Can you follow some of the links on the
I have the links
dashboards that I
ready.
provided? So, thanks. But why don't we start with, the first project I want to, let everyone know about is our 9W mobility plan. This is a project occurring, in coordination with New York State DOT and Town of Ulster. We have not yet publicly linked.
That's what I was just laughing at. Sorry.
Always working through kinks with the ArcGIS Online. But we have not yet linked our ArcGIS Online page publicly, but we will shortly. The 9W mobility plan will be looking at all elements of the 9W corridor from roughly the Aldi's north to Lakes Mill Road, as well as surrounding land uses in that area.
Consultant on that is.
CME, Creighton Manning Engineering.
So we are very close to issuing a public survey and in beginning the public engagement process associated with that project. So thanks, Dave. This is just a snapshot of what the landing page of the hub page will look like. Folks will be able to scroll down and eventually when it becomes live, you can click on the link and participate in a survey. There's also a mapping element to the survey. So you can, take the survey, use the mapping tools. This will be open to any individual who travels through the corridor. It's not just open to individuals who live in the area. There's also a participate at your own pace video and presentation that provides an overview of the existing conditions report. We do also have an existing conditions report that has been made available publicly last month. So we look forward to publicizing both the survey and the ARC Hub page and the resource tools that we have created for it. There's also a story map. So there's really a variety of different methods that the public can use to learn about the existing conditions, learn about the corridor, and provide their input and experience with the corridor. So forward to make an announcement very shortly.
And there's the issues.
This is the
Story map.
page. So folks can scroll through, read about it. This all occurs automatically. If people are maybe a little averse or intimidated by a engineering technical memorandum, this is a little more user-friendly method to interact with the information and data. So that is the 9W project. We hope to make that announcement soon. And we'll also be putting flyers and distributing flyers throughout the corridor, particularly among businesses. We really want employees to participate in the survey and learn about their experiences through the corridor as well. That's the 9W corridor.
Question on,
Sure.
I think I saw reference in that last sentence that was up there that answers my first question, which was the proposed redevelopment of Tech City is inside the fence in terms of
Yes.
this study
Yeah.
area.
The,
'Cause I
the
noticed-
answer is yes, relative to generation of vehicle traffic in the corridor. I think we're in the process of having an ongoing discussion with the consultants about the number of housing units that are proposed, which are in the 800 range.
880. Right.
With respect to what that means with respect to pedestrian and bicycle traffic in the corridor.
That's why I asked.
I knew that.
I remember at the very first meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee for the Long Range Transportation Plan in 2014, 2015. Supervisor Quigley said that his town is dealing with a legacy of having had so much development in the 50s and the 60s, and the legacy of that being the consequence that it is particularly unfriendly to pedestrians and bicyclists. This seems like a really huge opportunity or another legacy decision that ends up embedding the same kinds of facilities or lack of facilities, lack of connectivity that is already a real problem in town of Ulster.
We couldn't agree more.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
We also do recognize and try to predict future travel conditions based on some of these land use proposals and what those proposals, the impacts that they may have on the corridor with no design changes. So we're really looking at all elements of the system through this study. And we do want to have some aspirational goals and recommendations for really what we want this corridor to look like for the next generation. So we look forward to opening up public engagement soon.
Thank you.
So I wanted to go back to Barbara's question and ask Dave where we are on traffic counts.
Yeah, so the traffic count program, we're programming our current counts. We have the contractor. Everything's been signed on the county side. I believe we're still waiting on signature, or no, we have everything signed from the contractor. We might just be waiting on final signature from the county. We have been programming the counts, and I have the rotation counts set up as well as their special counts on Kings Highway. I have those programmed to be sent over, and then we're going to be doing a large batch of supplemental counts for the Kingston Rail Crossing study. So we're getting those counts together. We're looking to get counts out quickly. Dutchess County has worked with this new contractor. It's NDS. And they turned around the Dutchess County program of like 200 counts in a week, which was extremely fast. So we have high hopes we'll have a similar experience with the contractor.
We have count locations for the Kings Highway.
I have not placed them yet. We have like dedicated station locations where we can track. So if you place the counts in the same location, it's easier to track the numbers consistently. So we'll probably use the existing stations. I'm intending to double count it, one on each end at least, and then we'll be doing class and speed counts in that area as well.
Okay. And in other locations, are we doing any mile vision, but camera counts?
There will be camera counts conducted for the rail crossing study, definitely. These counters allow us to get additional modes such as bike and peds, and it allows you to get turning movement counts as well. So we usually don't do too many of those counts unless it's specific for a study. The cost is quite high on them. So we'll be seeing some of those for the Kingston Rail Crossing study.
Any questions?
Will that take into consideration the construction that's already going on in Kings Highway, the possibility of the housing
So
facility out there, and also the because they're already in construction, started?
these counts are a snapshot in time. It's a real, these are the number of vehicles that are going by. It is not a projection. They are adjusted seasonally. So if you take a count in the middle of winter, there's a factor that you can use to adjust it to get your total number of traffic that you would see in a year, but it's an actual count. It is not a modeled estimate. So, if there's a development that's going in, this count will not reflect traffic being generated from that development.
But I think it's important, I'm sorry. So I think it's important to add, though, that these actual counts are then used, that information is used in the modeling to estimate increase based on changes that are
Yeah,
happening.
they
So
feed into our
by
study.
knowing the
Yeah.
real data from what's happening in that moment in time, they're able to have a more accurate projection of where the future lies.
And would that also be considered the basis for a TIP application?
I mean, you would need a project for a TIP application. We have not done a TIP call for projects in the traditional sense since I have been with the MPO. We have been doing competitive calls for projects, which are usually dictated by the fund source. So if there's, a transportation alternatives program, which is looking at, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, if you have a project like for that, you can apply specifically for that fund source, but we have not done the traditional call for projects. AADT is always, so amount of traffic is usually a factor when you're selecting projects. As well as, number of pedestrians and number of trucks, that are going
But
through.
it's an official study that could be used as a basis.
The count program data is welcome to be used by anyone for any purpose.
When is the next TIP update due? Right.
It was discussed at the recent directors meeting. We should anticipate the next update to begin in 2024, fall of 24.
Any other project updates?
Sure. The Ulster County Transportation Council will be redoing its website. We have a draft contract. It has gone to the county contracts department for approval. So we hope to issue that or get that executed very shortly. It's a relatively small contract in the amount of $12,500 with a firm called Braun Media out of the
Capital District will do.
area. And we'll essentially be moving our website to WordPress. It will have the same URL, continue to be hosted by Ulster County government, but it will have a new format and framework and be hopefully much better organized and easier to find information going forward. And railroad safety study.
Yeah, railroad safety study is underway. We're expecting to have a stakeholder roundtable discussion coming up on the 8th, which we're going to be reaching out to businesses within the corridor. This study is specifically looking at the CSX corridor in the city of Kingston and just north into the town of Ulster, where you have the CSX rail yard. Following that meeting, we're going to be doing data collection. So we're going to be counting quite heavily, turning movement counts, volume classification counts, looking at queues, and then going through the corridor itself to look for areas where there's informal crossings that are happening and identifying land uses kind of surrounding there. We're expecting to have a public open house on the 22nd of June. Right now we have that scheduled or programmed in the Restorative Justice Center. We'll expect to see some materials coming out for the meetings shortly.
We need to get a web page.
The web page is up currently.
It's not under active project.
It is under active projects.
Oh, good.
Would that meeting be held at open house?
The open house at the Restorative Justice Center on Broadway?
And the June 8th meeting, is that open to the public?
That is an invitation to stakeholders that are in the quarter. Sorry, I'm trying to do a couple things here at once. This yeah, so we have
When did that go up? Thank you.
yesterday.
Okay.
Got him.
Stuck one in on.
Just in time.
But yeah, we do have the current project schedule there, a study area map, and brief description of the project.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Two other projects that are in development. We have issued requests for proposals for our coordinated human services, public transit, transportation plan. That's an FDA study. We've also issued an RFP for our route optimization study for the UCAT system. And I look forward to receiving and reviewing the responses for those two FDA funded planning studies.
Any questions on any of those? Going once?
Couple questions on other projects.
We can.
We do have more project updates too.
Okay.
No problem.
Resilience, did you want to show the dashboards?
Yeah, I did want to go through the dashboards, just so everyone is aware, we continue to develop and utilize our ArcGIS hub pages more and more. And some of the pages might be, I don't want to go as far as say hard to find, but they are located under project specific pages. We hope to consolidate these into, with our web update, into a much easier menu so that folks can find these resources a little easier. But why don't you just go through, we have full hub pages, which is essentially a website for a project. But then David has been very busy creating dashboards. So why don't you show some of the dashboards? I think we've
Sure.
already shown the sidewalk one, but.
Yeah, this was one of the first ones we had done. This is, we had done a countywide sidewalk inventory looking at sidewalks and crosswalks and specifically the conditions of them. And we went through and digitized their locations. And then from there, went out to actually take a look at the conditions of those. And so this is kind of a dynamic page, which will let you zoom into different areas. You can see what the breakdown of the conditions are, mileage of each. And then we even have photos for select locations. We have pretty good coverage. If we've done a score on a location that should have a photo associated with it. Again, this is a snapshot in time, so, you know, as things change and we have availability, probably interns, to go through and update this. It was used extensively in the City of Kingston Bike Pad Master Plan as background data, and we've seen it used by other municipalities. So I just have Kingston filtered, but you can go around to.
So the data is readily available to any municipality for their own use, if they needed it for doing their own inventory and analysis, or it's something like a grant application or a planning project. And the City of Kingston, I believe, enhanced the data that we provided them. We provided them the baseline, and they went out and did a little more ADA accessibility.
Yeah, and they started looking at materials as well, so bluestone percentage versus asphalt versus concrete. So we worked with them to extend the data set out a little bit further, and they were, you know, able to use our tool to do the data collection, which makes things a lot easier because you're able to do it with a phone, which is great. Live in the field.
Right.
So that's one dashboard that we had thrown together. This is kind of taking the data from that project and making it available out on the web. And yeah, found some good utility from it. Yeah, so right now, yeah, we're up in Saugerties. And
They're doing a sidewalk project. So,
well, yeah, they're welcome to use our inventory. And
Well, the DOT is just announced they're doing their ADA where and when.
Yeah.
For the state-owned sidewalk.
and we did not limit it to just local municipalities. I believe we also reviewed state facilities, even though they had been, the state has done their own review of those.
Yeah, we think we've captured all publicly accessible sidewalks.
I'm sure there's some that are missing, but
Right,
yeah.
right, yeah.
Well, there's a grading standard that would be looking at ADA specifically. So it could be a width issue where you literally, you know, it's like a little path and it wouldn't be ADA accessible, so not accessible. So there could be something there, but it's not ADA accessible. And you know, fully accessible is generally like brand new facilities, pretty much, that are up to current standards.
we had a crash data dashboard up as well.
Yeah, and so if we're done looking at the sidewalk, recently created a fatal and serious injury crash dashboard, which is taking, I believe, 10 years. Sorry, yeah, 10 years of crash data. This is the most recent crash data that we have available through the state, and breaks it down by mode, and you can even select out. So let's say I just wanted to see bicycle and pedestrian crashes. You could do that, and this would be 10 years of bike pad fatal and serious injury crashes. We have some charting going on here. We're looking to add some additional utility in there and different features. Right now, we're keeping the data pretty restricted that's on there until we can kind of get some clarification from the state and legal of what data we can share. We got to watch out for personal identifying information. That's one of the big things. So we're not going to be publishing MV 104s, but we're probably going to be extending the data to a little bit more than just the date and time and the mode of the crash, as we see fit. I'm expecting to build out an additional dashboard, which is going to take a little bit more of a bike ped focus, and is going to be taking a look at network screening that we did as part of the county road safety plan. And then a network screening that I did using the Safe Streets Priority Finder, which specifically looks at bike ped crash rates and metricing for the roads. But I did want to keep it separate from here, just because you could easily conflate the network screening with some of the bike ped stuff. So we'll be doing a separate one. Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago, there were 3 bicycle vehicular crashes in Kingston on the same day, 2 on St. James, 1 on someplace on the other side of Broadway, close by.
Third Street.
Not all of them were reported in the newspaper, which I think is usually based on the police, police reports. Do you
So this
Yeah,
data
very
comes from New York State DMV. So usually there's about a 3 to 6 month lag on when it comes out. We tend to use this data as it's like the authoritative source. So get data that, an MV-104 crash report gets filled out either by the individual or by reporting agency, gets submitted in. That data then gets coded. So it takes, if somebody's handwritten out that form, they will go through and take that data, put it into a digital format, so that way we can filter and do whatever we want with it. And then it gets pushed out. It's geolocated as well, so they place the points, make sure that the crash is located correctly. And then that is like the official crash of record. And that data gets used into ITSMR, which provides crash stats for the state, and it's like the official number of crashes that you would see. So this is like the source. So we're not getting crashes as they're happening. We're not taking news reportings of such and such crash occurred on this day. We are going to be waiting for that data to come from the authoritative source. We're not going to be publishing speculative stuff.
Right.
And the other thing is, with the severity, it does change. So a crash can change from a serious injury to a fatal. That happens. And we want to make sure that we're reflecting that.
Now, I will add, as in my role as coordinator of traffic safety for the Traffic Safety Board, the city of Kingston does send me the MV-104s on a weekly basis as they become approved within their own department. So I did receive the MV-104s for those crashes that occurred, and I did look at them and review them. I mean, in each case, the cyclist was violating the law. I can say, not even anecdotally, that's on 3rd Street, a cyclist.
Well,
went
why don't we discuss that,
Sure.
for the traffic safety board?
But we do
Does
get
that
them
answer your
as they
question,
become available
Kevin?
It does.
from the city of Kingston, but I don't get them from other agencies.
Understood. I mean, 2 things. Do we know how many cyclists there are?
No, and that's the difficult issue, and that's one of the reasons we started to take a look at how we're going to,
We've got,
how we do those count issues,
Yeah.
Kevin.
and when we have policies that are calling for mode shift, to promote mode shift, if we don't know how many there are out there, it's very hard to know is it trending in the positive direction in terms of reduction of serious injuries and fatalities? Is it flat? Is it?
There's nothing, the point being, I think your point being is that given the fact that we don't know what's happening as it relates to the cycling community,
Yeah.
you don't know whether, if you try to index it to volume, you don't know whether or not you're actually not just, you're not either, you can't tell whether you're either improving or all you have is a basically a flat number that doesn't reflect what's going on.
Has no context.
Yeah, no context.
So
Exactly.
it's an interesting thing that, an issue that's definitely been seen kind of throughout is, history of track and bike and pad crashes. When, we have these performance measures that the state puts out that looks at safety, and there's crash rates. So that's taking a look at, number of vehicle crashes per the number of vehicles going through, right? So normalizing that data. We do that for, serious injuries, fatals, for motorists. When it comes to bike ped, there's no normalization of the data. It's just a number. It's just the straight number of those. So one of the things that this is part of an Everyday Counts initiative from FHWA, and they worked with the city of New Orleans. They developed a tool called the Safer Streets Priority Finder, which I've pulled up here, which is a tool that kind of tries to get to a better way of looking at your road networks and bicycle and pedestrian crashes. It takes into account some, census data that's out there. It takes in the number of crashes that are happening and the severity of crashes for bike ped. And I've gone through and done an analysis looking at 10 years of bike ped crashes. And this is what the output from that is one of the things I'm looking to put out on a dashboard to try to give a better sense of where things are happening and and why, and, get to the heart of that issue of the rate,
I know one of the,
Give something.
one of the ways that Helsinki and Finland have really gotten a handle, I mean, they have 0 fatalities one of the last couple of years. Is that anytime there's a serious crash or fatality, they have an interdisciplinary team that's tasked with looking at that, and it's not just in terms of the user behavior or enforcement, but it's also in terms of design, because it is a Vision Zero Safe Streets approach that assumes that user behavior is going to be fallible, that people are going to make mistakes, whether they're in vehicles or on bicycles, and really looking at where they can address things through design changes to the street system. And they don't use, by and large, protected separated cycle lanes. Their bikes are in traffic, but they're 20 miles an hour. By statute, they're 20 miles an hour in Helsinki.
And I think that for me, anyway, I'm not speaking for me, that culture shift, that has not only occurred with respect to bicycle traffic, but also occurred with respect to how they treat vehicles as well. You don't see 40 million stop signs and warning signs, et cetera. That culture shift, I think, is the most difficult to achieve. And some of it can be achieved by design, and some of it can be achieved by enforcement, and some of it can be achieved by just basic respect. I don't know how we legislate that or deal with that, but I think that's what you're seeing in those communities, not only as it relates to bicycle and ped issues, but also with respect to vehicle issues, is that it's treated like the system is owned by everyone.
That's right.
And
Their process is transparent, completely transparent process. The results, the results of their analysis,
well, we hope to be completely transparent. So anything else, Dave?
Just, that was all the dashboard.
Yeah, do you want the resilience?
And then the resiliency project, which is complete, the vulnerability assessment. So this is a project that we fully completed. And actually, I was able to present to the New York State Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations annual conference just about 2 weeks ago in Syracuse. We had the conference overall. Dave and I were both able to attend. There are 260 participants from across the state, including the Department of Transportation. I sat on a panel to talk about the issue of resiliency and vulnerability assessment. And I presented with Genesee Transportation Council, Cecile Andrea-Conti from Cambridge Systematics presented with me on our study here, and New York State DOT presented on the topic of safe animal crossings and reduction of animal mortality on roadways, and combining those types of projects with resiliency projects, which is really interesting because it covered a bridge in my hometown. So it was a great panel and a great discussion. We're really happy to present on the vulnerability assessment, and also to notify folks that we plan on continuing this work with a phase 2 assessment.
And I think there's going to be a presentation at AMPO, or you got invited to.
Yes,
AMPO.
the same presentation will also occur at the national conference this year in September, which is in Cleveland. I will not be attending. Cleveland does rock, but I'm gonna have to pass a trip to Cleveland for what is essentially a 5-minute speaking engagement. But Cecile will be presenting this information on our behalf, which is fantastic.
Okay. Anything else?
Traffic Safety Board is scheduled to meet on Monday, June 5th in the Ulster County Legislative Chambers at 6 p.m.
And the policy committee meeting?
That is scheduled to occur on June 27th.
Okay.
I don't have a location. Maybe you want to talk about that.
So we were thinking about trying to move these meetings to Kingston in the legislative chambers as one way to hopefully get more people to attend. I'll be frank, I'm not a fan of Zoom meetings. I'm not a fan of doing that. We are allowed to do that because of the federal nature of the organization. But I think on the policy level it would be very, very nice to have more people in the room to have a discussion about what's happening rather than to have people both online and in the room. And part of that we hope would happen if we move to Kingston, although I would say that Kingston has a difficult parking challenge, whereas here the parking is much more liberal. We'll make that decision and let you know with respect to where we're gonna hold it.
I think from the supervisor's perspective, from the municipalities too, it might affect, it's obviously coming from the southern communities all the way to Kingston. Adds a considerable amount of more travel time, so
I hear you.
just putting that out there.
Mhm.
I hear you.
Yeah, not just speaking from my own
I-
perspective. but-
And we like Rosendale.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, the technology, I don't think the technology would improve necessarily
No.
in the legislative chambers.
No.
We still have the same challenges there.
So I have one last item I want to bring up that has to do with where we are in terms of overall funding for transportation, as well as our transportation funding as it relates to transit. I think everyone should be aware of the fact that the debt ceiling discussions that are ongoing in Washington may affect some of the generosity with respect to the current administration appropriations bill as it relates to transportation funding. And we should be aware of the fact that we may find ourselves in a situation where you have less funding available to us to program, given what the funding that was made available with respect to what is known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So we don't know yet. We haven't seen any guidance on that yet. We don't know, but we should know shortly. The other thing I would say is that we are working through what is an unallocated balance and funding that is remaining from something called the CARES Act supplemental and the American Rescue Plan funds. And those monies that are unallocated have been, there's been an expression by FTA that they may be part of a rescission coming through from the debt ceiling. So we have some funding that may be in jeopardy on the transit side. There are ongoing discussions between all three counties and the state and FTA with respect to the utilization of those funds and programming of those funds. I will only say that as of now, we don't have a way forward with respect to those funds. But we may be back to the council on a deadline basis to allocate some of those that funding. And there's about on the ARPA side, there's about $30 million in total funding that remains unallocated. And a lot of that unallocated funds has to do with facilities that are in Orange County. Most of them have to do with facilities that are in Orange County.
Question?
Sure.
So when you say coming back on deadline, that's to allocate those funds
If we have to, I mean, if we have to,
to,
yeah. I mean, when the funds were appropriated, they had a 4-year or 5-year shelf life. They didn't have to be appropriated until 2024, and they didn't have to be spent until 2026. And the transit monies can only be spent, ARPA monies can only be spent on operating costs. I think we have a situation in Ulster County. The UCAT is programming 1.3 million of ARPA funds that is coming from the TMA. 2021 funds that is coming from the TMA for operating costs. So those that funding is being done.
In a grant.
It's in a grant.
Yeah, they entered that into a grant.
Yeah.
Project.
So
so that's safe.
that's safe. Yeah, we assume it's safe. Let's put it that way. You know, it's safer than it was not being in a grant. But yeah, so that's, and while the council is not seeing these allocations in this work, it's because the rules for ARPA and for CARES means it doesn't have to appear on a TIP. It doesn't have to go through the normal 5307 process. But we're aware of those changes and we're aware of the allocations. I just want to let you know that that's out there, and you know, we burn a lot of money at the county level over and above what we take in on federal funds. So when we look at our federal funding, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's somewhere between 4 to 5 million on an annual basis, and we spend anywhere between 7 to 8 million on an annual basis. So the county is supporting transit right now in Ulster County to the tune of about $3 to $4 million on an annualized basis. We continue to look, which is why we continue to go after, one of the resolutions today is we continue to go after and look at our ability to essentially move into that TMA pot of unprogrammed money and move it into to help meet our capital needs. And we have fairly major capital needs coming up at the county level, including the electrification of the fleet, which is significantly more costly than the current fleet that's out there. And then where to house that fleet. Generally, as you move to electrification of the fleet, you also have to put in the infrastructure to charge it, and you have to put in the infrastructure to house it. They're not as efficient or recommended to be housed outdoors where you can house your typical fossil fuel fleet. So I just want to make you aware of the council aware that those conversations are ongoing. Someone asked a question about performance measures, as I recall. And I just wanted to go back and have Brian talk a little bit about the performance measures that the MPO adopted relative to safety.
Well, I think we went into that in great detail during the previous two meetings.
Well, I just wanted I don't have to talk about,
Putting me
but
on the
basically,
spot.
just basically say that, you know, we do, we do have performance measures. They're given to us by the state, and every MPO in the state, it's my understanding, uses the statewide performance measures. So the council has adopted performance measures, and we use the statewide performance measures. And that's out there, and you can take a look at those performance measures. It was part of a resolution that the council adopted.
Is that based on the safe systems?
I don't know what the state basis it
No,
on.
it predates the safe systems approach. What it looks at, it takes a look at 5 metrics. Serious injuries and fatalities for cyclists and pedestrians, serious injuries and fatalities for motorists, and that's 4. And then there's a 5th metric, which is why, I wish you hadn't put me on the
I
spot.
thought it was like that. Fifth, and then, I don't know if you do free.
That one is, yeah.
Because I thought there was,
The safety performance measure does not include freight. Anyway, there are 5 criteria that are examined, using statewide data that are put together, and each MPO statewide adopts the statewide goal for measuring safety on the national highways. Actually, it's on all roads.
Right, but as we just referenced before, we have data for vehicular traffic counts, but we don't have data for pedestrian and bike.
right, and that's what I think the 5th one is. I think there's a rate calculation for motorists, and I think there's a number for motorists, of just, you know, straight number, and then there's rate and no, how would that work? Yeah.
So we
Yeah,
can,
we'll have to take a look.
next time, we'll make sure we have the resolution in front of us.
But bike
Yeah,
ped is
when
just,
we're
yes.
discussing it.
But I just want to make sure that you knew that we do adopt performance measures, and they're there. I'll leave it at that. Any other business
Can I
for
go
the council?
back to
Yes,
progress
I'm sorry, you
updates?
did.
Yeah.
I apologize.
That's okay. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, I was looking for not just clarification, but just to make a statement on the resolution that we passed and something that you said. Legislator Stewart and I had doubled the amount of money put into bus shelters from 250 to 500,000 in the capital fund, and I'm assuming that's where this money is. And the intent was to put in 48 bus shelters. So we were minimalizing a study the executive said she was interested in the plan. And then a lot of that would go into capital. So I just want to make sure that we're not spending it on more plans and we still don't have the capital to actually put the infrastructure in.
This is capital, these are capital dollars.
These are capital dollars.
They're capital
But
dollars.
we're only looking at 15 now, not 48,
Mhm.
10.
You know, these are capital dollars for that. This is separate
So
and
this
apart.
is not out of our
That's
capital,
correct.
but okay, perfect, okay.
It's separate and apart in addition. We're always chasing money for you, Lord. Mike,
Two projects that specifically involve town of Rochester, just curious where they are, in process. The 4455 corridor study that we put out from Gardner and Rochester, is that scheduled to be moved forward? Or not?
Yes.
And that's
It's still programmed.
It's still
on the
programmed.
Unified Planning Work Program.
Yeah.
I'm just asking, especially as we're getting into the tourist season, we're gonna run into the same problems.
It's a study that I have a lot of interest in pursuing. I think there's a lot of opportunities, especially for like a better word, crowd control and reduction of vehicles, and vehicle notifications of people coming off the freeway, of what the conditions might be up on the mountain. Right now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects. 4 underway, 2 pending, and a third is gonna be the need to update the long-range plan. So there's a lot going on.
Understood.
So as soon
I
as
just wanted to make sure, it was still somewhere in the radar. And that's a fine answer. The second, and you tell me what we can or should consider. So we met with our engineer last week on the Voice Mill Road Bridge, the Bridge New York project. That was done with construction costs of 4 years ago. We're projecting a minimum of a 25% increase, and that's if we just replace the bridge as is, where is, with no widening for pedestrian and bike ability. If we do that, we're looking at probably 30 to 40, maybe even 50% increase in cost. Is there any ability to request, obviously not from the state, I know it is what it is, within the MPO, within the county, is the transportation council, to some assistance? I'm certainly not asking.
when are you going to construction?
Now they're saying 2025. First they were saying 2024, now they're saying 2025.
So the short answer is if you're going to just construction after the next tip update, then there may be the ability within the tip update.
I would suggest you volunteer to sit on the TIP subcommittee when it's formed. No, that said, yeah, that will provide a potential opportunity to identify additional STBG off-system bridge funds for us.
I will say in the past, the state has not been quick on wanting you to increase your funding until you have estimates in hand or
Yeah, PS&E. Yeah.
Understood,
contract in hand.
understood.
Because they don't want to have to go back 3 or 4 times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, understood. And this is just projected estimates at this time. He kind of laid out options of option A, option B, option C,
And
this
that's-
is what we can
And
build.
that's exactly what we're seeing with respect to the carbon reduction funds, the carbon reduction funds, which, you want to look at and say we can do new projects. We're literally filling holes in old projects because there's that much cost differences. And that's true region-wide. I mean, that's true in Orange County, it's true in Dutchess County. That's when they look at what they're gonna do with the money, they're like, we have to fill holes in projects that are started.
No,
We do precast deck panels from LHD from last year to this year, the prices are 50% higher.
Yep.
Per square foot.
and I did suggest he reach out to you since you know that bridge very well, so.
So,
Thank you.
When I
So
designed it,
anything else?
No,
Anything else, Mike?
no, thank you.
Ask a question, David, on your, crash data dashboard.
Yeah.
Is there gonna be a filter for the railroad accidents?
Rail,
Crossings, because right now, it's very hard to, CSX is not forthcoming. I mean, at least it would be the county's information on, instances of, accidents and whatever. It would help with the, bicycle too.
Yeah, so I will say for the,
That would be a simple step to just improve.
for the rail crossing data, the Federal Rail Administration publishes out, they specifically have a way to filter out, crashes at rail crossings.
And would that be included at the county level? or the village?
It's included down yet, for everything. I can send
The link.
the link.
There's a link to it.
Does that
There-
cover private as well as public?
It covers the whole core, it even covers like workers crashes throughout the corridor and trespass crashes as well. So it's,
That's
they have to,
something that would be
they have to report a lot. And so that's available, though a little difficult to find.
But
So I'll send you a link.
you can, and it's that link would be on the website so that other people can also get.
Well,
Dashboard.
you know, the FRA does publish their own. The
But that
dashboard,
doesn't mean you can't link to that, right?
I mean, we do
Tough
have,
to link
you know,
on a
traffic safety board. We could probably throw it on there as safety resources, but
For what?
Anything else, Barbara?
No, that's it. I'm sorry.
you know, it's somebody else's data,
Kevin, you had
essentially is what it comes down to.
Thank
You know.
I know you want to close the meeting. You know, I'm wondering, because the state is now embarking on a active transportation plan. Ulster County's done great work on its non-motorized transportation plan, but it's from 2008. And so number one, I think I'm requesting that we update it and take advantage of this opportunity to really reframe it as an active transportation plan, that would align a county planning process with the state and very likely, maximize the opportunities to secure funding. Because we would be aware of what the scope of the state plan is, of the kind of, you know, all of that, and there's a call in, key recommendations in the 2008 county plan to continue the NTAC, which I believe was the advisory committee that assisted in the development of that plan. You know, there's another recommendation for the Friends of Ulster Trails, which I think has been fulfilled by the Trails Advisory Committee and possibly other O&W Rail Trail Alliance, et cetera. But we don't really have a non-motorized or an active transportation committee. And I'm not sure, you know, it says, the last thing it says is lead UCTC. So that's what I think there's a real need to start to draw these things together in 2023 in light of all the things that we've been talking about, including climate change and lowering greenhouse gas emissions, as well as dealing with traffic fatalities and vulnerable users. So that's my suggestion and request.
November is a good time for that when we update the UPWP.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we start that update for the UPWP, that would be a good time to have that discussion as part of that update. The Unified Planning Work Program. Anything else? Anything else from anybody online?
Hearing none.
Hearing none, thank you all. Have a nice Memorial Day, and we'll see you in
June
June
27th.
27th. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you.